The first drops fell long before the thunder came. They slid from the edges of leaves heavy and slow, sinking into the soft carpet of moss below. The forest drank in silence. Each sound was muted by the weight of rain. The soft patter on bark, the hiss of water through pine needles, the hollow drip that echoed between roots. It had rained for hours. The air was thick with the smell of rot, wet bark, old leaves, and the black sweetness of soil turned over by worms. The trees leaned into the storm, their trunks groaning faintly under the strain. Water ran down their sides in thin silver threads, gathering at the roots before sinking into the earth. Beneath that earth, the ground moved, not enough to notice, not yet. But deep below, under layers of clay and tangled root, the soil shifted in slow, uneven waves. Water found its way into the spaces there, dripping through small caverns, trickling over stone. The sound was faint, rhythmic, almost alive. A lightning flash burned through the canopy. For a moment, the forest was white. Every branch, every drop of rain, every vein in every leaf became a blade of light. Then darkness returned, heavier now, the kind that holds its breath. The storm rolled closer. The wind moaned through the hollow trunks, bending them until they creaked like the hulls of old ships. The rain fell harder, turning paths into streams. Pools gathered between roots, trembling with the rhythm of distant thunder. The forest had known storms before, countless, through centuries, but this one felt different. It did not rage. It waited. Beneath a great oak at the heart of the woods, water pooled in a hollow where the trunk split in two. The bark there was black and soft, eaten through by age. Its roots reached deep into the soil, thicker than a man's body, twisting like frozen serpents. And under those roots, far below, where no light or air had reached for generations, something stirred. The rain above masked the faintest sound, a low scrape, the brush of stone against flesh. A ripple passed through the wet soil, slow and deliberate. Tiny bubbles rose from the mud, breaking softly at the surface. The earth settled again. The forest sighed. A deep exhale of wind through drenched leaves. Lightning flared once more, tracing the lines of the oak's roots across the ground like veins. The thunder that followed came late and low, as if from beneath the ground rather than above it. Then the rain eased. The air grew still, and in the quiet that followed, the forest listened to itself. Down among the roots, something ancient moved again. Once, twice, and then was still. By the time the rain stopped, the forest no longer felt alive. The storm had passed, leaving behind a stillness too heavy for dawn. The air clung to the trees, thick with mist and the smell of wet bark. Drops fell in slow, uneven rhythms from branch to branch, each landing with a soft thock on the sodden ground. The great oak at the forest's center stood unmoving, its trunk dark as old iron. Its roots rose from the soil like the bones of a buried giant, crossing one another in thick, spiraling arches. Moss clung to them in heavy mats, dripping with water. Beneath one broad arch, the earth had collapsed, a hollow opened by rain and time. Its mouth gaped just wide enough for a man to crawl through. Inside, there was nothing but dark. The smell of the opening was strong, cold, mineral, and deep, the scent of places where air has not turned in centuries. A faint line of water slid from the rim, dripping steadily into the hollow below. Each drop echoed faintly, like the ticking of a slow clock. The forest was quiet, but not peaceful. No bird called, no insect moved. Even the wind seemed to hesitate among the branches. The only sound was that patient dripping, slow and steady, vanishing into the unseen dark. And then, somewhere below, the sound changed. It was not loud. It was not even clear. Just a brief shift in tone, as if the drip had struck something that was not stone. The echo came back softer, duller, as though absorbed by something that lived rather than something dead. A small tremor passed through the ground. The roots of the oak creaked faintly, adjusting their weight. The hollow widened as a patch of soaked soil slid away, exposing more of the space beneath. The dripping water now fell freely, vanishing into a narrow black shaft where the roots disappeared into the depths. Something within that darkness moved. A faint sound, the slow drag of weight through wet soil, drifted upward. The noise was steady, patient, deliberate. The water running into the hollow rippled once, then again. No wind blew, yet the moss along the oak's lower roots lifted and settled, as if stirred by breath. The air grew colder. The smell changed. Less of rot, more of stone and iron. And though no creature could see into that hollow, something deep inside was rising toward it. It did not hurry. It moved the way the forest thought. Slow, inevitable, unending. Another drop fell. Then another. And beneath the great oak, something listened. The forest had not yet dried when it began. Mist drifted between the trunks, clinging low, moving only when the ground beneath it shifted. The hollow beneath the great oak filled with slow, steady drops from above, rainwater seeping through the cracks, tracing paths down the blackened roots. Deep below, in the narrow tunnels, carved by centuries of water and worms, something waited. The air there was old. It carried the smell of metal and stone, of breath long held. The soil was dense and close, heavy with weight and silence, and within that silence a sound grew. Faint at first, no more than the slide of grain on grain, a whispering of earth disturbed. Then came movement. It was not the scurry of small things or the crawl of roots. It was slower, heavier, a deep, drawn-out motion that pressed the soil outward as it passed. The walls of the tunnel trembled slightly, releasing fine streams of sand. A ripple spread through the ground like a sigh. From the dark came the shape of scales. They gleamed faintly where drops of water touched them, black and green and gray, colors stolen from the forest floor. The serpent moved with purpose, its body sliding through the narrow path it had carved over years of sleeping. It did not hurry. The motion was smooth, patient, deliberate, as if each inch of the journey mattered. The rain above slowed. The sound of it dimmed. The serpent coiled once round a thick root, its body tightening against the cold wood. The texture of the bark pressed into its skin. The root itself gave a faint creak, as though recognizing what held it. Above, the oak stood taller. Its trunk groaned softly in the still air. The forest seemed to listen again. The serpent lifted its head. Its eyes opened, not bright but deep, like stones underwater. They caught no light, reflected nothing. The tongue flicked out once, tasting the soil, the dampness, the rot, the pulse of root and fungus and slow decay. Everything it touched was familiar. Everything above had forgotten it. The creature pressed forward. Its body followed the pattern of the roots, winding upward, tracing the same slow spiral that trees grow by, an echo of something the forest no longer remembered. With each movement, the air grew thicker. The moisture clung to the soil in beads. The mist above deepened, sinking toward the ground. When the serpent reached the upper chambers, where the hollow opened to air and rain, it stopped. Only the tip of its snout broke the surface, touching the cool underside of the root. It did not emerge. It only coiled there, half in shadow, half in stone, resting against the pulse of the tree. Then, as though responding to that silent touch, the oak's branches trembled. A few remaining drops fell, and the forest above exhaled. For the first time since the storm, the trees were utterly still. Every leaf hung motionless. Every sound withdrew into the soil. The serpent closed its eyes again, and the earth began to remember. The storm had passed, yet the forest did not recover. Usually, after rain, the woods filled with sound, the faint hiss of runoff, the chatter of birds returning to their nests, the creak of trees shaking water from their limbs. But tonight, there was none of that. The air hung thick and wet, the silence almost physical, as if it were pressing down on every leaf. The serpent rested beneath the roots. Its coils filled the hollow spaces where water once gathered. Its body wound tightly against the tree's core. The rough skin scraped faintly against the bark with each slow breath. The sound was small, but it carried upward, through the root, through the trunk, into the still air above. Every branch seemed to hear it. The wind that had once moved freely between the trees was gone, replaced by a strange heaviness. The leaves hung low, their edges dripping in perfect rhythm, though there was no wind to shake them. The moss along the trunks darkened, gleaming like wet stone. Somewhere in the higher canopy, an owl blinked once and did not hoot. Far below, a fox paused mid-step, one paw lifted, nose twitching toward the air. The forest was not empty. It was listening. The sound of the serpent's movement was not loud, but it was old. It hummed like the slow pulse of the earth, a sound the forest had once known but forgotten. The trees, the ferns, the damp soil, all seemed to recognize it now. The serpent shifted. Its body pressed tighter around the roots, the weight settling deeper. The tree above gave a long, low groan, as though something inside it had begun to wake. The sound was not pain, not strain, but memory. The fox lowered its paw. Its ears flicked back, unsure. The owl spread its wings, then closed them again. The mist hung thicker, drawn close to the ground. Then came a faint tremor, the smallest quiver through the soil, gone almost before it began. It passed under the leaves, under the moss, under the still bodies of the forest's smallest things. Even the air seemed to feel it. The serpent's eyes opened once more. They were calm, unblinking, patient. It did not look for prey, nor toward the light. Its gaze was inward, into the soil, into the cold pulse of the roots that fed the forest. The tremor passed again, stronger. This time, the forest seemed to breathe with it. For the first time, the woods moved, not from wind, not from life, but from memory. Branches creaked faintly in unison. Water dripped in measured rhythm. The smallest seeds in the soil trembled as though remembering how to grow. And then all was still again. The owl did not fly. The fox did not run. The forest simply listened. Below, in the dark, the serpent coiled tighter, and the sound of its slow breath sank deeper into the roots. The forest had heard and would never be the same again. The serpent moved again at dusk. It did not crawl, did not rise. It shifted, a slow tightening of muscle, a subtle turning of weight, and the ground responded. The soil pressed outward, small clumps rolling down into the hollow beneath the oak. The tree shuddered once, its bark groaning under strain. The air above the forest floor grew colder. A mist, thin as breath, slid between the roots. It gathered near the hollow, coiling close to the ground like smoke without fire. The damp carried a smell, not of decay, not yet, but of something older, something that had been sealed away too long. Beneath the roots, the serpent exhaled. The sound was nearly inaudible. It wasn't the hiss of a reptile, nor the sigh of air escaping from a cavern. It was softer, a tone that lived between vibration and breath, the low hum of earth shifting around something alive. The trees heard it first. Their roots quivered, drinking deep from the wet soil, stretching toward the sound without knowing why. The leaves above trembled in answer, a faint rustle that carried no wind. The forest pulsed. Not visibly, not loudly, but inwardly, as though remembering how to move. The serpent inhaled again. The air was drawn through the tunnels, over the rocks slick with age, through the veins of the soil. Water trembled in its channels, rising slightly, then falling back. The roots tightened in the ground like muscles, stretching and relaxing with each unseen breath. The forest began to breathe with it. Each exhale carried up through the roots, through the bark, through the fine web of fungi and stone that connected everything. It touched each plant, each insect, each fragment of wood, asking for stillness, for attention. Even the wind stopped to listen. The oak's trunk swelled faintly, its surface damp and warm. Sap moved inside, slow and thick, its rhythm uncertain, as though responding to a second pulse beneath its own. The branches above hung low, their tips trembling with invisible weight. The fox returned to its burrow and did not emerge. The owl blinked once and lowered its head, silent. The frogs at the pond fell quiet before their first song, and under it all, the serpent breathed. The soil no longer felt dead. It shifted like skin, soft and damp, molded by unseen motion. Water dripped in new paths, carving thin channels through the dirt, marking where the breath had passed. For a long time, nothing else happened. Only that rhythm, deep, slow, certain, moving through the world unseen. Then, far to the north, the forest floor cracked. A thin line appeared in the mud, the size of a root, but straighter, cleaner. It stretched for several meters before vanishing under moss. The forest did not resist it. It accepted it quietly, like remembering an old scar. And beneath the oak, the serpent stilled once more. Its body wound tight around the oldest roots, its breath echoing faintly through the ground. becoming part of the forest's own. By morning, the air had changed again. The mist did not rise, it thickened. It clung to every branch, every leaf, every hollow, until the entire forest looked drowned in its own breath. The sun had not yet found its way through, and what little light came through the canopy arrived gray and formless. The serpent no longer moved. Its body lay deep beneath the oak, pressed tight around the heart of the roots. The scales no longer glimmered. They looked like the earth itself, damp, motionless, unseen. But its presence remained heavy and absolute, as if the ground still remembered the rhythm of its breath. Above, the trees stood unnaturally still. Their branches hung without weight, without tremor. No wind stirred the leaves. The air was dense enough to swallow the smallest sound. Even the falling of a droplet from a leaf was muffled, as if the forest had drawn in on itself. A sparrow landed on a branch and did not sing. It tilted its head once, eyes bright, wings half open, then froze. The oak gave a low, hollow sound, not from the wind, but from within. The noise ran through its trunk like a slow vibration, spreading outward through the network of roots that bound the forest floor. The ground seemed to hum for a brief moment and then fell still again. In that moment, every tree became silent. Not quiet, silent. No breath of sap moved inside them, no scent of life. The forest's rhythm, that slow exchange between soil and sky, between leaf and root, had stopped. The serpent's final breath had been long ago, but something in the earth still mimicked it. A faint expansion, a contraction, too slow for eyes to see, too deep for ears to hear. The sparrow flew away. Its wings broke the air with a single, sharp sound, the only noise that belonged to life. When it was gone, the silence returned, fuller, darker. The trees no longer leaned toward the sun. Their branches grew heavy with stillness. Their roots wound tighter around the serpent below. The forest had not died. It had simply forgotten how to be awake. Even the air seemed to forget what to do. No scent of pine, no trace of rot, no motion. Just the hollow, endless weight of quiet. And beneath it all, the serpent slept again. Or perhaps it had never woken at all. Its body lay deep in the soil, and above it, the forest waited without knowing what it waited for. Morning came without sound. The light did not arrive in beams or color. It seeped in, pale and thin, as if unsure it still belonged here. The mist that had buried the forest all night began to rise, but slowly, like smoke from wet ashes. The trees stood motionless beneath it, stripped of shadow, without voice. Their bark had turned a strange color in the weak light. Not brown, not green, but gray, like the skin of something long preserved. Dew gathered along their roots, but it no longer glistened. The forest did not greet the dawn. No birds called. No insects stirred. The air, though warm, carried no scent. At the heart of it all, the oak remained. Its trunk towered above the stillness, its bark slick with moisture. The hollow beneath its roots had filled with water overnight, calm and glassy, reflecting the shape of the tree in perfect silence. Beneath that mirror, the serpent's body slept unseen, its breath long faded, though every inch of the forest still remembered it. The ground no longer pulsed. The rhythm was gone, yet something lingered. A memory without form. A quiet echo that brushed against the living things that had not yet realized they were lost. A hare crept out from under a fern. It paused at the edge of the hollow, ears twitching, eyes wide. It sniffed the air once. There was no smell. It waited, then turned and moved on. No sound followed it. Even the wind, when it finally returned, was wrong. It moved through the branches but made no voice. The leaves shivered, yet gave no whisper. It was as though the forest's language, its heartbeat, its name, had been pulled from it, left buried somewhere beneath the roots. By noon, the mist had thinned. The sunlight reached the forest floor at last, but it did not bring warmth. It illuminated only the stillness, the motionless ferns, the frozen puddles, the hollow oak, and the faint ripple in its dark water. The serpent did not rise again. It had done what it came to do. Above, the trees remained standing, perfect in form, but empty of memory, like a body without a pulse, like a song that could no longer remember its first note. The forest waited, silent and patient, until even the sun forgot to look for it. And so it remained, rooted, breathing in name only, a place without sound, without time, and without a name.